Hi everyone, I've just sat down to paint for the day and I thought that I'd show you how I do some shading on hands. I've done blue shading on her face. I'm not sure whether you can see, but you can see a little bit here. I do 3 or 4 different colours of shading before I do any veins or anything like that. And I always start with blue. I'm not sure what other artists do, but I always do blue shading first, then purple, then a bit of red, and sometimes different variations of those. And I've also done, her feet. You can see a little bit there. Her knees. And I always do a bit of blue shading up the leg too. Some people don't, but I do. And I've also already done this hand. It's very hard to see in this lighting, but it's very translucent blue. I try not to put it on too thick because blue's really hard to get off. So if you stuff it up, blue's hard to get off even with thinners. So what I usually do when I do shading is I have one sponge to dab off excess and then one sponge for blending, brush obviously to put it on, and another brush I use just to get out the creases and some like fiddly spots that are hard to reach with a sponge. So I always make sure that I mix my paint up and take the excess off my brush. And I always start with the palm of the hand and then I do kind of like the fingers and then just work my way around. I don't really have any advice on how to do this. I sort of just wing it, but I try not to put too much paint on at once because I've done that before and it was a disaster because blue's, like I said, blue's hard to get off even with thinners. Now I don't know if you can see, do the palm of the hand and then I do a bit of the wrist as well, and then later on I do like purple and some red because I like a lot of colour in hands and feet. I know a lot of people don't, but I'm a fan of colour and lots of it. So I just think it just adds more realism to it. And I don't really like plain looking dolls. That's just me though. I mean, everyone likes different things. And I always pick up the wrong sponge, so this is the sponge I use to get the excess off before I start blending. And one thing I just want to say is some people I've noticed when they sponge, they drag. You just got to make sure that you pounce and not, like drag, especially when you're getting the excess off, because if you've got excess paint on there and you drag, you're going to move where you actually want it, and that's no good. So you can just see now, I don't know if you can see that, just got slight blue here, and I've just taken the excess off. And see how a little bit of paint has gone in that crease? So that's when I use this brush. It's just a random brush that I got somewhere, and you can see it's all buggered up because I do this with it all the time. So if you just, in the hands, you see paint pulling up in creases, I just get it out. Oopsie. That wasn't supposed to happen. Okay. My camera. So I just dab it in like that. And a little bit around the wrist. So it just adds a little bit more realism, I think, anyway, and a bit more depth to the hand and the wrist. So you're not just like one plain colour, if that makes sense. Okay, so now I've done the palm. And just make sure that I'm happy with it first. Okay. I'm going to, so the fingers, I normally go just above the nail bed, and I go, so I do the tops first, and it just, so you can add a bit of colour into fingers instead of just having them plain. And then, whoops, see what I mean? If you drag. So I go around, all the way around the finger with the blue. And later on I'll do like, closer to the nail bed, I'll do like a red and a purple, kind of like our fingers. That's what I normally do. I just look at myself or look at my kids' fingers or other dolls that I have in my collections. And I also look at a lot of pictures. Pictures are great for colours. Pictures of real babies or reborns. And I often look at like prototype artists' pictures all the time. Or, you know, just general pictures. And with the fingers, I do use this brush most of the time because it's really hard to use a sponge in the tiny areas. I do use the sponge just to get the excess off, but blending and things like that, it's just easier to use my brush. So now I've done around the fingers. You can see that there, I think. Yeah. So now I'm going to do a little bit up the top of the fingers, and just a tiny bit, not a lot, because obviously you don't want our hands to be all blue. So I just dab in the corners, maybe around the pointing finger a little bit, and also this bit, and just around the side of her finger. So later on, obviously, I'll do like a red here, so that will join up with the blue. I'm just going to dab the excess off before I blend it in. I don't know if you can see around the top of her hand.